Good evening, class, or good morning, or good afternoon, and welcome to my literature review for the Parenthood section for Sociology 125. I trust everyone's doing okay and everything's going well. Seems to be the grades look good and everything's going fine. But if you need help, always email me, and I usually get back fairly quickly. So it's interesting. The unit that we're doing right now is on parenthood, and so I decided that one of the best ways to examine the social dynamics of parenting, parenthood, and what it means to children, what it means to our society, what it means to actual parents themselves in a broad sociological perspective, would be to look at what happens when there are no parents. And I was living in Europe at a time when the EU was dealing with the aftermath of massive amounts of abandonment of children in Romania. And it was a great opportunity, a horrible thing, but a great opportunity for social scientists and psychologists to come in and figure out, what this means. What are the roles of parenting? What does it mean to our society in general? So the reading I'm going to do for you guys, the lit review, I'm modeling how to do a literature review, is called Anguish of the Abandoned Child. It's a co-authored piece of research, and it's from Nelson Fox and Ziana. They're all from the University of Maine, and it's a very, very good piece. I read this while I was in Europe, and I thought I'd dig it back up and share it with you guys, so that you guys, A, another topic, but B, you can see this from a sociological perspective. So the premise of this is, what are the conditions that make parental abandonment happen, and what happens when abandonment does occur. And to be sure, there's different levels of abandonment. You can have emotional abandonment, physical abandonment, financial abandonment, all of the above. But abandonment is a big, big issue in many, many ways, and it affects people's behavior and development as individuals in a social context. So the theory that these three put together is that parental abandonment is not so much of a personal issue as it is a systemic social issue. That is, economic, political, and social issues contribute to the unfortunate occurrence of abandonment. It's not as if people just in a vacuum, parent-wise, decide, I'm going to emotionally abandon my child, or I'm going to financially abandon my child. There's things that play into abandonment as an issue that contribute to the occurrence of these things happening. So that's the premise that these authors have. So they went to Romania and they focused on what does abandonment look like? How does it manifest? And they kind of unpacked this case study. It was a cross sample of this child abandonment. So let me give you the background of the study here. It goes way back, 1966. The supreme leader of the Communist Republic, the Union, Communist Union, Nicole Sesescu, he decreed that the biggest asset to Romania would be human capital, that they should have as much possible population as they possibly could get. The population was not doing so well there. So he thought that the strength of a nation is within the amount of people, the population. The more people you have, the higher chance that you'll be able to get somebody that's brilliant, that can contribute to society. The more people you have, the more workers there are. That was his philosophy, was that, hey, look, let's build our population up. So there was a mandate from the communist, not to be confused with socialist, but communist state, that said you had to have children. So the birth rate skyrocketed and became so poor. The people became so poor because of the added burden of having to have children that many of them had to be institutionalized. Like the parents are like, I got 10 kids and I can't support these kids anymore in many, many different ways that we can't support them. So then the government, the Romanian government then opened up institutions to take these kids in. Well, then you had 1989 and Glasnost happen, and they deposed their supreme leader, and the state shrunk down in to a degree where it was not even funded at all. So there was no more institutions. So within a matter of weeks after Glasnost in 1989, you had 180,000 children with no home, complete orphans, just massive amounts of orphans. That was within the first week, and they just kept building and building and building, and upwards to 500,000 orphans over that first 5 years. And so that's an incredible amount for a country of the size of Romania to have to bear. So you just had massive abandonment, and like I said, abandonment in every way, financially, economically, emotionally, psychologically, physically, the whole thing. They were just massively abandoned. So they went in and they did studies. And what are the effects of this? What happens to children if they're abandoned to this degree? In Sociology 101, we talk about feral children that grow up without any type of interaction at all. And we know that their brains do not develop at all. And they reach a certain point in stage where you cannot develop after that. You don't learn how to speak, you don't learn how to function. Once that opportunity is gone, and it's different ages for kids. This is more psych than socio, but once that opportunity is gone, it's gone. Interestingly enough, the same kind of phenomena happens when there's emotional, physical, psychological abandonment, but not to that level where the children are feral. They get lack of social skills, underdeveloped sense of identity. They really don't have a good feeling about what it is they like, what it is they don't like, who they are, how they contribute, what their space is in the world. Underdeveloped use of spoken and written language, emotional instability. The IQ of institutionalized children, the ones that the state did take care of, or that kind of went from house to house, was on average 10 points lower than those children that had homes in the same areas with all the same variables contributing. The kids that were raised at home had IQs that were 10 points higher than these institutionalized kids. 10 points, which is a tremendous amount. And they say that there's a sensitivity period of development is 30 to 52 months, somewhere around in there, where if you don't get good development socially and intellectually and psychologically, that it's kind of lost. So we're seeing that the feral phenomena plays out on a smaller level with abandoned children that aren't completely abandoned. That it's on a spectrum. It's on a continuum. That development doesn't happen quite as good. It might not be. It might not turn out to be a feral child, but your development might not be as good. And what this means to us for parenting, what this means to the world, is the importance of interaction. And not plunking your kid down in front of the TV set or giving them an iPad to look at. Although there's some research about all this stuff about the interactive mechanisms of the new types of media that might have some benefit to it. But for certain physical, emotional ties and interaction for intellectual development happen on a personal one-to-one basis much more efficiently than they do even with some sort of surrogate, such as a computer or a TV or whatnot. The physicality of these children was different. The individualized lack of individualized attention also, they found, inhibited brain development. That the actual development of the brain was different because of the lack of stimulated interactive experiences or schema. They did MRIs on these kids, and they revealed that in certain areas in their brain had less developed gray matter. 44% increase in ADHD diagnosis. Now that gets a little bit more iffy because it's like, well, are they more easily diagnosed with ADHD because they don't have somebody that's going to protect them and say, challenge that diagnosis? But that's a lot more. So maybe it's not quite up to 44%, but there's a definite higher occurrence of ADHD with children that don't have constant emotional or reliable and regular emotional connection and intellectual connection with parents, the ones that are left on their own. The lasting governmental consequences for lack of parents, having a situation where there's a lack of parents, higher rates of imprisonment, recidivism. More people go to prison, more crime rates happen, higher rates of being dependent on the welfare or the state because they're institutionalized, so they kind of know how that system works, and they kind of become part of the cog of that. Higher rates of psychological care. All of these things are due to when we see that parental involvement is totally remiss. So it kind of begs the question, I wonder, a lot of our social problems, a lot of the social issues that we have, if there was some way of helping parents become more involved, maybe, encouraging parental involvement with their children, teaching parents how to be, better in terms of being more engaged with their child. Would that clear up? If we had social programs like on the front end, would it clear up the costs on the back end? In other words, would it be proactive? Would we not have to pay for prisons? Would we not have to pay as much for crime? Would we not have to pay for psychological problems? Would we not have to pay, for having higher rates of people dependent on social welfare in the back end? Sometimes the front end invested social programs end up deterring having to pay for somebody on the back end. Sometimes in America, we're not quite that. We don't kind of connect the dots on that, and we just see the costs of it, and we don't understand that that's actually, it's like preventative medicine, like a little bit of exercise now, paying for a gym membership now will actually make it so you don't get heart disease. Well, maybe paying for parent classes or parent support groups or clubs or something like that. There's some countries that do this. Or even parental leave time, maybe investing in that on the front end so they can bond with their children more comfortably would alleviate having social deviance issues on the back end. That's an interesting concept, and it's certainly worth, like the physical, taking care of yourself, taking care of yourself as a parent. How fit are you as a parent? All these are good questions. And this study was very, very interesting with those results, because it really showed the impact of what happens in a case study that's so extreme, where there's just no parenting. So I'm going to give you a question that I'm going to let you guys interpret and use. And I may make this a discussion question, or I may make this just a question for you guys to just answer to me. So I want you to tell me, is the long-term economic and structural best interest of a country to help generate human capital? Is it the long-term and economic best interest of a country to generate human capital, like the Supreme Leader of Romania was trying to do? Is that a good idea to do? But is it just enough to have kids, or do you need to actually get them engaged and develop them? Do you feel that disenfranchised and neglected citizens are the responsibility of the state or local surrounding community, like volunteerism? In other words, if parents really, really drop the ball and they just neglect their children emotionally and physically, and they turn out to act out in school, is it now, should the state come in and help deal with these behavioral issues and problems before they be turned into crime? And do we need the state to do that? The big thing now is small government. Well, who steps in? And if parents neglect their children, should then we hold the parents more responsible for raising good children? Is that more government regulation? Good questions. I want you to use the case study to inform your opinion or your answer. I'm going to post this question online in a clear, succinct way. You can use my comments a little bit, but I'd like to see you guys develop this in your own, with your own critical thinking. And remember, use terms and concepts from our chapter and book to answer your question. A very, very interesting case study with the Romanian children, and very, very sad. But it's a good it's a good way to unpack and get an insight into what happens with the socialization process of parenting, and how important parenting is for the betterment, and not just that child, but then society might have to pick up or might have to pay the price for parents that neglect their children. And of course, the child pays the price and doesn't become a very happy, well-adjusted member of society, and maybe not feel so good about themselves. All right, guys, I hope to read some good comments. Thanks.